Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tommy Luterio, the manager of the Delaware Cost Study here at the Higher Education Consortia. We're going to be looking primarily at a PowerPoint today, so I'm going to start by sharing that with you, and would ask you to communicate through the chat option. When we get to about 2:30, we should be done with the presentation, and if you'd like to ask some questions and continue the dialogue for a few minutes, we'll be able to do that. So today's webinar is entitled Best Practices in the Use of the Results from the Delaware Cost Study. And it's important to thank you for your participation in the cost study. Send out a Valentine's to everybody that's done work in gathering and validating the data. We feel very fortunate that we have such great participants and dedicated professionals working on this. And without your work, the study wouldn't be possible. From the point of view of best practices, today's webinar is going to focus on the focus at the academic department level, because we've done research and found that when you're looking at the cost of instruction, approximately 80% of the variability in costs can be explained by what academic discipline you're examining. We will look at a publication that has confirmed this, and I'll give you a link if you'd like more information to a article in MarketWatch that explains that research. But for now, we're going to concentrate on looking at the best practices, and I'll give you an outline. Today's webinar will cover the use of sharing of the benchmarks through the view-only option in the web portal. It'll talk about selecting the best aligned benchmark for a specific program, how to combine multiple metrics in a standard visualization, the use of longitudinal views and department position within a peer group distribution along various productivity and cost metrics. And then we'll talk a little bit about some additional in-depth benchmarking that you can do using data envelopment analysis. So to talk about the view-only option, this is a choice that you can use within the web portal to share information, both the data that's been provided to the cost study and 3-year average benchmarks that relate to those data with department chairs, deans, budget officers, provosts, and any other appropriate personnel within your institution. It's fairly easy to use, and the view would provide the person that you grant access a look at previous years of the study back to 2015. So it can provide a longitudinal view of change over time. The view-only option was highlighted in our previous webinar as a way of going out to department chairs and getting their assistance in validating data at the data entry part of the study. But you can also use this at any time to share the data for a department and the 3-year average benchmarks that we've developed for the productivity and cost ratios that are in tables 3 and 4. So it really can be used at any time. It's, as I said, fairly simple to add a user as a view only. And when I say view only, just to clarify, that means that they are unable to edit any of the data. They simply are able to observe it. So you would log into the portal, you go to the users tab in your home page, and then you'll see a option to add a new user, and it's a fairly short form to add name, email address, and then specifically which programs you'd like to have that individual have access to. It'll look something like this, whereas you see in our university of example that's displayed, we have several view-only participants, if you will, and they have different access to various CIPs. The first one is listed as the institutional administrator. That would be, in many cases, those of you who are serving that role. And the other are given access to specific CIPs. So you could provide access to one department or all of the departments that you've entered in the study. From their vantage point, they'll just see the particular departments that they've been granted access to. Now, when they go in, they will see the data entry for their department. And at the bottom of the data entry form, there is a radio button. It says Review for Submission. And it'll look like that little rectangular radio button just above the UD logo. You click that and it'll take you to the top of what we refer to as the second page. There's going to be some institutional information repeated. In this case, you see that it's University of Delaware, English department, and it'll show the Carnegie classification, which in our case is a research highest activity. You'll see below that results display options. Now, where it says average type, you can select any of the three any of the three national norm types: the Carnegie, the norm by highest degree awarded, or the norm by proportion of undergraduate degrees to total degrees. Where it says program type, that really refers to institutional governance. So you would be able to select both all of the public and privates, or just simply the privates or publics separately. When you click Show 3-Year Averages, you'll see that will display these 3-year averages in tables 3 and 4, which are going to be down towards the bottom of this page. You can also change the year in which you're interested in looking at. So a department chair or a dean could go back to previous years, back to 2015, and look at similar metrics if you were participating in the cost study at those times. This is something like what it would look like if we selected the highest degree option. In this case, because the English department awards doctoral degrees, it would be those programs that are awarding doctoral degrees. But we selected private, so it would be only the subset that are governed privately, that is independent governance. On the right, you'll see a view of what Table 3 looks like in the columns that are kind of highlighted in yellow, and there's a highlighter circle at the bottom. The black digits represent the metrics for the various levels of faculty rank, credit hours per FTE at the tenured, other regular faculty, supplemental, and teaching assistant levels. And then also for graduate instruction, the total credit hours, and then the organized class section averages taught. So you get a lot of information that would be of interest to a department chair or a dean. And then you can also see Table 4 below, which has the cost ratios. I'm not going to show those because we have other topics to cover today, but I would encourage you to explore this and certainly ask me if you have any other questions about the 3-year averages. Now, the next topic on our agenda is going to be incorporating data from the national norm benchmarks with your data, so that you can focus on what the sort of global level of instruction for your faculty looks like. And then you can also, if it's appropriate, compare your department with others in terms of research and public service grants that have been earned and expended. What's that looks like here at the University of Delaware is these 6 key performance indicators. In the blue, you'll see the sample department. In gold, you will see the National Carnegie benchmark for this by year. So we're both combining longitudinal data and the Carnegie norms in this example. We picked these key performance indicators because it focuses on the undergraduate teaching by tenured faculty in the upper left chart, and then places that in the context of the total student credit hours. So that would include undergraduate and graduate instruction. And then on the far right is the instructional cost per student credit hour. And you'll see that this particular department is teaching at or above the level for undergraduates. And there's been a downward trend, which is important to consider if you're assessing program evaluation. But the cost has been higher than average, consistently and I'd say significantly. But you also see that in terms of separately budgeted research and service expenditures down at the bottom right, that this department has exceeded the grant number for each faculty member every year by quite a bit. So that puts us into important context. You also will see in the lower left two charts, organized class sections taught and total student credit hours for all faculty combined. So again, this adds important context if you're doing academic program review. So the importance of this is that it really captures the overall picture of a department's productivity and cost in a single page. Now, turning our attention to another topic, we really encourage the selection of appropriate peer comparisons when we're doing any kind of analysis. The Carnegie analysis that we saw in the last slide was important, but sometimes departments or deans are much more interested in a specific subset, and that subset would really best be geared to your academic department peers. Sometimes institutional peers are not well aligned with departmental peers. That can be for a variety of reasons. For instance, if you're at a research-intensive university, but the department provides primarily undergraduate degrees, there might not be nearly as much research happening, and there might be more of a teaching focus by the tenured faculty. So what you'll see on the screen is that by using the peer selection tool in the web portal and using a criteria of at least 10 peer institutions, you can first select the CIP so that you're focusing on a departmental level comparison, and then you can find matches from within the cost study. Under institution name, if you put in just something like SUNY as an abbreviation, you'll see that you'd get back all of the participants in the cost study that provided data for English that had SUNY in their institutional title. So it's a way of beginning to build your peer group in a convenient fashion. And of course, if you know the institution that you're interested in, you can simply enter it in there and it would come up, assuming it's in the appropriate study year. Now, once we've got a peer selection, we're also suggesting that using a distribution of values within that peer group for the various cost ratios or productivity ratios is important. And we're going to look at the use of a box whisker plot today as one of the possible ways of doing this. If you're not familiar with the box whisker plot, which sometimes is the case, basically the box identifies the median value for the distribution, the lower and upper quartiles, and then of course the whiskers are the minimum and maximum values, assuming that you've dealt with outliers. Here is a illustration of a best practice that we would like to promote, and that would be the use of numerous comparisons over a period of time. So you'll see that we have box whiskers developed for 4 consecutive years of cost study data. The cost ratios, direct expenditure per credit hour, and faculty size give us an idea of how does this department look in comparison to its peers in terms of size and cost. And then the 3 bottom indicators show the teaching at the lower division undergraduate level, upper division undergraduate level, and graduate level instruction. You can see that this probably is not an ideal arrangement because it's a fairly large department in terms of instructional faculty. Its cost is consistently at or above the 75th percentile, and their teaching is at or below the median, and in fact, in upper division student credit hours and graduate student credit hours, they're below the 25th percentile. So this example of a history department would likely need to be trying to increase their teaching relative to their peer group. Now, one way that we can help identify those that are doing the most with the resources in the department in terms of teaching is to use data envelopment analysis. This is kind of an advanced benchmarking method, and we're certainly happy to try to help anyone that's interested in learning more about it. We've done quite a bit of exploration in this area and have quite a number of examples and models that we can share. The idea is that you compare the members of a particular group with each other and say, okay, among these who are actually making the best use of the resources that they have in terms of faculty and at a specific cost. The 2 elements that are important in data development analysis to make this a best practice is that you select the group for comparison carefully, because it is important that you're comparing similar departments. And then within data development analysis, not only do you see that there are multiple ways of being efficient, but you can also find a path towards greater efficiency. An illustration of this is that sometimes a department is making the best use of their tenured faculty as well as their other regular faculty or supplemental faculty, or sometimes there's a burden that's shifted too far in the direction of one faculty type or another. As you can imagine from this description, this is what I would refer to as a multi-dimensional model. So in our models, generally there are anywhere from 8 to 10 dimensions that we're modeling. So it's difficult to show this graphically, but we will look at an illustration of a 2-dimensional illustration. But the one of the advantages of using data development analysis is that we can calculate an overall efficiency number that ranges between 0 and 1. And this efficiency number isn't a linear scale. And in fact, there are often about 50% of all the departments in a group that are being compared turn out to be efficient at the level of efficiency number 1. And to illustrate that, we use a 2-dimensional plot where you see the red dots in this are data points, and you can see that the segments that connect the red data points at the outermost regions of the region of this quadrant form a data envelope. And then there are 2 data points that are inside the envelope. And you'll also see that there's a path mapped out from those points to the data envelope or efficiency frontier. And so we can not only identify which members of the group are at this ideal level of efficiency, but we can also chart a course so that those are less efficient can move towards efficiency. So that's one of the great benefits of data development analysis. Here is an illustration of a very efficient biology department, and you can kind of tell from these efficiency numbers why they are deemed to be efficient. The faculty size is among the lowest in this distribution. Their costs are somewhat less than the median cost for the distribution. But if you look at their lower division student credit hour productivity, it's above the median and towards the 75th percentile. Now, interestingly, in the upper division, they are about the 25th percentile. So that's not perfect. But then if you examine the graduate productivity, they're actually above the whisker for the distribution. And you'll see that there are 4 outliers in that area. So what you see is that within this group, there is at least 4 programs that are teaching a high number of grad credit hours relative to their comparator group. And that may provide us with some information about what could happen at the upper division level, since a lot of times there's some overlap between what's happening at major level courses, junior and senior courses, and graduate courses. There might be room for improvement by some consideration of curricular changes. So we can see that not only do you get information using this type of analysis where you're less than efficient, but even if you're at an efficiency level of 1, you can see how you compare to your peers, and there are potential decisions that would inform how to improve even while maintaining kind of a constant level of teaching at the lower division level. So we'll be talking more about this at another webinar to try to give you a better idea of exactly what's involved in data development analysis, and if you're interested, we can work with you to advance that. Again, just to summarize, this is very much a focus on discipline level analyses. We do have other examples of best practices that relate more to the institutional level, looking at all programs simultaneously, or in some cases we have some systems that look at each of the university level compared to each other with a single number. And so at a future time we can illustrate some of those, and if you're interested, certainly contact me. One final note that I would offer, yesterday MarketWatch published an article called "Why It Costs Colleges Far More to Educate a Physicist or Teacher Than an English Major." This is a research finding that was a result of our collaboration with 2 public policy economists, Kevin Stang and Steve Hemmelt. Kevin's from the University of Michigan, and Steve is from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And also our own John Sawyer collaborated on the paper, which is in the National Bureau of Economic Research. There's a lot of information that we plan to use for additional development of new benchmarking. And if you're interested in the article, I'll put up the URL for the MarketWatch article, and you can look into it yourself. You will hear more from us about this in the future. It's an area that we think has great promise for developing, yet again, some additional benchmarking approaches that would inform comparisons. And I won't go into any more detail, but I would say the basic idea is using English as an index, you can compare the cost of instruction for other disciplines with English. And you can further differentiate between the cost drivers that are responsible for those cost differences, which have to do with salary and compensation, class size, workload, and then other than personnel expenditures. I'll invite you to join us again in a month for the third webinar, in which we'll look in more detail at how to use the peer analysis tool and to discuss options for using the national norms to get more granular data. So if you're able to join us then, we'll be delighted to have you come along and continue this webinar series. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing the video, and I'm going to see if there are any questions that anybody has. Probably the easiest way to do this would be to simply use the chat. So let me see if I can I make the screen bigger? I'm afraid I may have missed that one. But I can do one thing that will help, and that is I can share the PowerPoint after the meeting. If anybody's interested and had trouble seeing the screen, that might be the best way to solve that problem. Other questions about best practices? I'm going to unmute everybody so we can try to talk if that helps. Anybody have any questions or comments, or would like to go back and look at anything in more detail? Okay, this has been our moment of silence. I always appreciate those myself. Let's see. Looks like we might have a question, but it looks like mostly everybody is just saying that they've exhausted their 30-minute time for this, and I hope that coming in on time was helpful in meeting the rest of the needs for your day. Again, I want to thank everybody for the hard work that you do in the cost study. As I said, we really feel that we're able to take advantage of having really good information from dedicated professional staff in the IRE, and hope that the publication of our research findings will be useful to you, and be interested in any feedback that you have on that. So unless there's any other questions, I'm going to sign off for today. And as I said, I'll be glad to share the PowerPoint with you, or answer any questions that you may have via email or phone call. So once again, thank you very much. And I'll bid you a happy rest of Valentine's Day.